Hi, I'm Thea. Everyone said I was crazy when I opened the first restaurant in a desolate Miami warehouse district. Now the whole world knows that as Wynwood. Then I did it again in Alapata. Ever wonder how a place goes from not to hot? Join me for a behind-the-scenes look at what really goes into igniting a neighborhood. We'll talk with the risk takers, the pioneers, the restaurateurs, the real sparks of neighborhood ignition. This is Thea's Neighborhood Magic. In this episode, I talk with Charles Foschini, Senior Managing Director at Berkadia, America's largest privately held real estate investment bank. Charles has closed $25 billion in capital placement in 841 transactions across 27 states. Charles and I talk about his role as the dollars behind the deals. Hi, Charles.
Hey, how you doing?
Nice to see you. Thanks for doing this with me.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Charles, please tell me what you do and how you do it.
Okay, so I would tell you what I told my daughter when she was little and asked me the same question. I make big loans on big buildings. And I'm known for that on LinkedIn, and I've fortunately been known for that in my career as well. I've been very fortunate to be involved in a lot of deals throughout my career. And in the capital markets, I've sold buildings, I've financed buildings, I've financed developments, and everything in between.
We met at my restaurant, Thea's in Alapata, and you came because it was an amazing restaurant, but you were also there for another reason.
Yeah, so at that time, I think that was 11, 12, I was financing a few buildings along the Miami River, which was then a fairly new location. And in fact, some buildings had failed in that market. And I was trying to convince lenders why they should make a loan. And by starting at your restaurant where people could see you, see the vibe that was created there, but as importantly, see the attorneys that came in and out, see the health workers that came in and out, see the business folks that were coming in and out. They got a real feeling for the patina of who might occupy the buildings that I was trying to finance.
It happens all the time, but a restaurant is really ground zero for the ignition of a new neighborhood, don't you find?
I do. And I really didn't necessarily think about it at the time because you were a little bit of an oasis in what was otherwise a desert. But when I think back on my career in the early days of Brickell, which was not yet then as mature as it is today, Pericones, by example, was a restaurant that put down roots and really the city grew up around it. It was very, very interesting to watch.
So, but on a personal level, Charles, you used to come back at night to the private club where there was music. And I felt that you did enjoy that excitement of being in those new frontier kind of neighborhoods as well, outside of work.
Well, one, I was very happy to be on your short guest list. And two, it was something that was unique to Miami. It was very different. And it was a great experience. And really positive foreboding of what was yet to come in Alapata and the Health District.
You've played a really big role fueling economic growth in a lot of underserved neighborhoods in Miami, North Miami, Alapata, the Miami River. Do you find these new frontier deals particularly compelling? I
do. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not a Navy SEAL, I'm not a school teacher, and I don't do anything that fantastic. I didn't invent a vaccine. But to work my craft in markets that don't yet exist and create particularly residences for people that didn't yet have a place to live as areas are gentrifying, I find that to be very personally rewarding and profitable as well when things go well, both for myself and my clients and the firm.
How do you approach these deals where the regular metrics just don't apply because of the nature of these underserved areas?
So I would say, and I tell this to younger folks coming into the business, I've always made my money on the deals I turn down. And what I mean by that is that really frees the time for me to spend on buildings where I think I can be successful and where ultimately I am for my clients and myself. And in these neighborhoods, Miami specifically, it's very unusual. In your earlier podcast, the mayor brought out that it was then true, and maybe today, that it's one of the poorest major cities in the United States. So you see this lavish luxury, and then you see the dichotomy and the opposite. But you also understand from a construction perspective that the costs are the same. So to build a luxury apartment in the beach is almost identical to the luxury or non-luxury affordable units somewhere new. And the chief differentiator in those areas historically has been land cost. And so if someone can come into an area and get a very good valuation on the land, then there's an opportunity to build to a return that not only provides profit for them and their investors, but also allows the residents to live there at a more affordable rent than if they were in the major urban cores. And I would have to say the city of Miami has really been leading in some of what they've done in creating these AMI overlay districts.
AMI being?
Affordable mean income. And if you build to a certain level of AMI, which is many times at or below the market rate, then the city of Miami will give you a variety of bonuses, either in density without having to add the associated parking, or in terms of forgiveness of permit fees and impact fees, by example. And that's allowed developers to build more in a smaller area. And that translates to units that can then be lent out to the marketplace at a more affordable rent. The other way you can do it is with direct or indirect subsidies from the cities. And we've seen that more and more. You mentioned the Sebastian and the Gardens deal. That was a very long-term assemblage. But in the end, the city and the city CRA district stepped up and assisted in a way that project could be as beautiful as it will be Class A by every measure. But it'll also be able to offer AMI direct rents that'll attract teachers and folks that need to be in that area but otherwise wouldn't have a home.
Do you also coordinate financing these grants that come from the city and these CRAs?
I don't. I typically come in after that's been put together. I certainly need to have a working understanding of it because I have to portray it in discussions with the lenders that will lend, sometimes subordinate to that. And our firm, Berkadia, is privately held and owned by Berkshire Hathaway and Jefferies has a very large, actually Florida-based bond practice, and they're very skillful in that area.
Charles, what makes a deal compelling to you beyond the numbers?
If I can create impact and create something that wasn't there before, I get a lot of satisfaction in that. If I could add in some small way to the enjoyment of the residents, whether it be an office resident that I provide capital and a bridge loan to get redeveloped, or in a multifamily where I provide the capital for new kitchens and things of that nature, that to me gives me a lot of personal satisfaction. And then the complexity of the deals, I started my career as a leasing broker and I found that very linear, but to be able to work with the capital in different areas, whether it be debt or equity or mezz, and then work in different asset types, whether it be a hotel or an apartment or an office building, industrial, that to me gives me a lot of personal satisfaction.
We were talking about creative financing. A lot of times these deals are not as straightforward in these underserved areas as in other areas. You must be finding solutions all the time for these pioneer entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, I just came from a meeting with a traditional banker, and halfway through I stopped and told him I felt like I was giving my client a deposition, and I'm really not built that way. I started my career as a broker, really now doing investment banking of real estate at a high level, but I find the ability to be creative and think through to a solution is what differentiates me and why clients would hire me to bring their buildings to fruition.
I always felt that a lot of these lenders that supported the pioneer entrepreneurs also had to have great vision to jump into these deals.
Yeah, it's part and parcel to a lot of things. I mean, lenders tend to run with the pack. So you have to find the lender that sees things differently. Sometimes it's because they have that same entrepreneurial spirit as an institution. Many more times it's because they charge more for the risk that they perceive that they're taking. And in those cases, if you can match the lender to the opportunity and there's enough margin there for profit, you can secure a transaction and make it happen.
What would you say to any pioneer entrepreneurs that may be feeling discouraged about getting financing? Are there options, variations in financing?
There are, and look, if there's no need to be discouraged, you only need one lender at the end of the day. So you only have to be right that one time, and you really have to stick to it. When the market's vibrant, 24 months ago, I made my money by picking up the phone. Today, whatever lender was on the other line would be the suitable lender. Today, I might have to make 50, 60 calls to find 4 or 5 lenders that are interested to get one to the table and work through to make sure they get to close. It's a much more challenging time, and you just have to be mettled for it in a different way.
What kind of trends do you see in the transactions? Are there more Lizette Calderones and Sebastian Semlers, or are they, massive corporations coming to you? What kind of transactions are trending?
So as an intermediary, it's really important to have a diverse clientele because business ebbs and flows and regions ebbs and flows. But I would say in South Florida specifically, what you're seeing is a real blend. The local folks that you mentioned that have an entrepreneurial spirit and were here first are doing really well with projects. And that's allowed the more institutional folks to take notice and either at the end of the day be the acquirer of those projects or want to come down and do things on their own as well.
What are the smallest deals that you do if we have people listening who are thinking, well, I've got a 6-story building that's going to have,
Yeah, I would say, I like to be the arbiter of what business is suitable for me. So I take a lot of calls. My average loan size career-wide has been about $40 million. Anything over $5 million we can focus on, not really because it's too small or too big, but because usually that's the minimum for the lenders that I work with routinely and where I can be most helpful for a client. Most of the lending we do is non-recourse, so the client does not have obligations beyond what's called the bad boy carve-outs, and clients find that very appealing as well because lenders really look to the value of the real estate at the end of the day and not what the client has beyond that.
Do you feel that other lenders shy away from deals in kind of tougher areas?
You always eliminate a bunch, but there's always some left, and then some really need the education, and that's why we're here to walk them through. I mean, starting at the meeting at your restaurant where they could see the people, and then driving them. If they drive the neighborhood, they would never make a loan in that neighborhood, right? It was once you got past it really wasn't. It was hard to describe as a neighborhood because it's really an industrial city center where you have, and it was underutilized industrial, yes, right? But if they sat in the restaurant and saw the people working there, then they could translate that into income, and then they can translate that into need. And Allapattah specifically is amazing because if you look at the north, south, east, and west, and how easy it is to circulate to the balance of the city. Why, not to pick on anybody, but why would you want to pay 3 times as much to live on Brickell when you can take a metro rail into Brickell and avoid all that traffic and that expense? And why would you want to waste an hour and a half in your car coming from West Dade and Doral when you can be in Allapattah and miss that entire commute? And if you work in Doral, have a reverse commute. So there's opportunities for folks that can take maybe a 10,000 view in the air and look down and say, wait a minute, there's a hole in the donut here. This place has great access to mass transit. It has great access to the metro rail. There's a trolley stop, bus stops. That's not a parlance that 10 years ago people were really focused on. I think the hard irony is that the small business owners who do own the restaurants that facilitate a lot of these deals. I mean, you're not the only person to tell me that they did multiple deals in my restaurant. Those small business owners really need that financial support as well in the first place in order to create those environments that show the spark of ignition. Charles, you didn't come from a lending background. Do you think that works for you? Yeah, it's been a huge advantage to me, I believe, because I'm not classically trained to say no. A banker makes more or less the same amount of money, whether they say no or say yes. And if they're wrong a couple of times, they're looking for a new role. From my perspective, I eat what I kill. So I have a much more alignment with my clients. And I look to make sure that the deals I'm working on are sound. I have to understand the numbers. I have to understand the approach that my clients are taking to be successful with their numbers and counsel them if there's a disagreement. And I do believe that has helped me a lot. I'm a 3-time alumni of the U, including a law degree. And I don't use that degree formally, but I use it every day in terms of a methodology of thinking. And I find that to be helpful in my career path, and certainly my clients have respected that as well. Charles, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. All right, it's been a pleasure. Too bad it's not at the restaurant.